Vincent Keaveny. Vincent is the incoming Lord Mayor. Vincent, I think November is kick-off, isn't it?
Yes. Hello, Richard, and good evening, everyone. All being well, there's a formal election process, of course, which has been referred to already this evening. The Master mentioned that the livery elect the Lord Mayor, and that happens on the 29th of September on Michaelmas. Although technically, what the livery do is identify the two favourite candidates from the three names that are held up. And those names are then returned to the Court of Alderman, and the Court of Alderman vote. We actually do vote. We've trooped off to one of the side rooms in Guildhall, and we actually write the name on a piece of paper, and it gets counted in the side room, and the decision is then announced. The good news from my point of view is that the Court of Alderman decided in fact, in my case now, a little bit over 2 years ago, that if I am one of the two names returned to the Court of Alderman, they will elect me as Lord Mayor in September. So all being well, with a sufficiently loud shout from the liveryman, and I hope we will have a full Guildhall on the 29th of September. Let's hope that the liverymen will be there in their hundreds, that I will be elected and take office as 693rd Lord Mayor in mid-November.
Well, it's not just tradition which might be a disincentive to disrupt that process. You are also, of course, a very considerable city lawyer. So I imagine no one's going to rush to tangle with you. That's your background, although, as Margaret said, you share with her a heritage in Ireland. And I was trying to think if there'd ever been an Irish origin Lord Mayor before.
Well, we've been doing a little bit of research. The Guildhall team have been looking at this, and they haven't been able to identify anyone who fits that particular bill. So on the basis that it's going to be very hard to contradict me, I am going to claim to be the first Irish Lord Mayor.
I hope you're going to introduce some traditions, maybe wave some shamrocks around, or I don't know, hit someone with a shillelagh or something.
So there may be, there will be one or two. There'll be a green elf. The current Lord Mayor I was actually at something this afternoon in Mansion House, an in-person event in Mansion House. Again, great news to have events coming back on stream. But the current Lord Mayor describes himself as the Green Lord Mayor, because of course he's very much focused on the environmental agenda, the build up to COP26 in Glasgow in November. So I've been telling him, well, Lord Mayor, if you think you're going to be the Green Lord Mayor, I'm going to be doubly green. I'll be green squared, Lord Mayor. I'll both have the green element of the environmental agenda to carry on, but then the Irish dimension as well.
You trained as a lawyer at University College Dublin, also Trinity College Dublin, I think, and then came to London at the end of the 80s?
That's right. That's right.
What brought you to the city where you are now to be Lord Mayor?
It was a very exciting time in the city. Big Bang just happened. What was going on in the city was really very much part of the everyday news almost at that time. If you remember back, along with I suppose in the background the communards music and all that sort of thing going. But I was an avid viewer of the Money programme on Sunday evenings on BBC Two. It was one of those things. I was really interested in spending a year or two in the City of London, getting a little bit of city experience before I went back to practice at the Irish Bar. My intentions at that time were to practice at the Commercial Bar in Dublin, and that was where I was heading. So I came to London in early '89, expecting to spend a year or two, get a little bit of city experience under my belt, and go back to practice in Dublin. But there we are, 30-something years later, about to become Lord Mayor. I think it's testament to London's attractiveness in so many ways. It's a fantastic city to work in and indeed to live in.
A very fascinating time as well to be a lawyer in the financial sector. As you say, Big Bang had just happened. Deregulation was transforming not just the city, but the UK economy. So I imagine there was plenty of grist to a lawyer's mill in all that.
It was a really interesting time. A lot of the capital markets. I'm a capital markets lawyer, so my clients are big companies, banks, financial institutions, raising money on the international debt markets, which sounds very dry and very technical, but it can be very interesting. You're working with companies, really looking to working through some very interesting issues and problems, and it's very international, very cross-border. But we were really, although there had been bond issuance and been capital markets activity through the 60s, 70s, it really took off at that period in the late 80s into the early 90s. And the transformation over the last 30 years has been extraordinary, driven as well a lot by technology.
Extraordinarily exciting, heady air to breathe, an extraordinarily exciting and challenging and demanding and rewarding place to be. Why then, all of a sudden, start dressing up in furry robes, wearing golden chains, being preceded by mace bearers and sword bearers, and exercising your considerable powers as the Admiral of the Port of London?
Indeed, and various absolutely. Well, of course, the reality is, and it's slightly sad to admit it, that the ceremonial piece is probably less than 5% of the Lord Mayor's activity during the course of the year. It's wonderful. I don't think you can do it if you can't look yourself in the mirror when you're in the full kit. To say the first time I went into Marks and Spencer's to buy a pair of hold-ups, rather, I've decided hold-ups work for me rather better than tights. So the fact that you've got to be able to sort of to laugh at yourself at times about some of this as well. But the reality is, it is a very small part of it. The principal role of the Lord Mayor these days is as ambassador for the UK financial and professional services sector. In a normal year, you spend about 100 days of the year traveling. That's the external, the outbound. On the inbound, pretty much all the major financial players in the world, whether it's governors of central banks, ministers of finance, indeed heads of state very often, wanted to come to Mansion House to talk to the Lord Mayor, to take the temperature of the city and the financial professional services industry of the UK and the related tech industries, which are increasingly an important part of our portfolio.
Two issues spring to mind immediately for me. One would be, I suppose, issues related to Brexit and the possible effect that's going to have on London standing as a financial centre, passporting your department, not mine. And the other one, I suppose, is COVID, the extraordinary demands that's made on our economy, the extraordinary challenges it poses not just to our economies, but to our society. And the bill, which I imagine when that arrives, is going to take some pain. Unpick all that, Lord Mayor.
Well, indeed. Well, Brexit. I pick Brexit for that's the easy one in some respects. Brexit is both a Brexit has happened. So we're in a post-Brexit world. We're all Brexiteers now, whichever way we voted back in 2016. The reality is, for the city, it presents difficulties, but it's also presented a huge amount of opportunity. And the good news at the moment is that the opportunities are prevailing. The number of jobs which we've lost in the city is something less than 10,000 jobs at a time when we've actually been creating many more new jobs, particularly driven by technology and by the boom in fintech and in the entry, the transformation, the digital transformation that the financial service industry is undergoing. So we certainly have to go out and sell our wares even more competitively and more convincingly than we've ever done in the past. But we will. I have huge faith in the ability of the city to continue to thrive. That said, COVID is certainly a change in both in terms of the way people work, and as you say, Richard, the economic challenges. I'm in the camp. I'd be very interested to take a sort of a show of hands. I'm very much in the camp that I think inflation is going to be one of the big consequences that we have to deal with in the next 5 to 10 years. I think inflation, which we have managed to kill off as an economic problem, inflation is coming back as a problem. An awful lot of that is related to the extraordinary amounts of money which effectively have been created by central banks around the world over the last 12, 18 months, on top of what was already a lot of central bank monetary activity. So we have got I think there is going to be some significant economic fallout, which won't be apparent for a few years, but we will be paying a price for a lot of this stuff over the next decade.
There's quite a lively debate about that, isn't it? And some have said that quantitative easing, for example, has shown us that actually governments can print money, and that can actually be part of a prudent and sensible approach to solving or to responding to financial challenges. I'm sensing that the kind of money that's had to be realised to meet this challenge takes us into more dangerous waters, in your view?
It's my personal view. I'm not an economist, but I talking to a lot of economists and a lot of investment bankers who have strong finance and economic backgrounds. My sense is that we will have an inflationary issue to deal with. What you referred to, I think it was described as modern monetary theory, is fascinating, but it's a complete experiment. Nobody has ever done this before, and it is hard to believe that all the monetary rules that have guided economic theory and have been proved to be pretty reliable guides to outcomes down over the last 100 or so years. It's hard to believe that all of that we can sweep all of that aside and rewrite the rules and not actually have to deal with some problems down the line.
So if I can move just from the macro to the micro, it's not very micro actually. As a leather seller, we own a chunk of Bishopsgate. And as you can imagine, anyone who's in commercial property in the City of London has been thinking quite hard about the more local challenges, if I can call it that, posed by COVID. For example, selling office space in a building which you can't get people in and out of safely if any sort of social distancing applies. And with a workforce that has got used over the past year to working from home and enjoying the benefits of that. Do you think that's going to have a big impact on the city and a particular impact on livery companies who might derive chunks of income from commercial property?
It's interesting. We are actually seeing no falling off of interest in property development of the city. In the first 3 months of this year, the City of London Planning and Transportation Committee granted planning permissions equivalent to 80% of all of the previous year's planning permissions. I mean, there is real interest, and part of that is some of the buildings do need to be replaced. I mean, where I am this evening in my office in Aldersgate Street, there are a number of very tired 1970s buildings that are very difficult to let now. There's one next door to us and there's one around the corner, both of which will be replaced over the next few years. So some of it is refurbishing stock, some of it is replacing stock. The reality is, I think people will be back. That people won't necessarily be back in the office on a 5-day week basis, but they'll be back on a 3 and a 4-day week basis. One of my competitors, the Slaughter and May, big competitor in the legal world, Slaughter's announced its new flexible working policy last week. I think it's very interesting. They're the first I've seen that have done this. And they're saying for the junior lawyers, for the trainee solicitors, for the newly qualified, for the 1 and 2 year qualified, they'll expect them to be in the office for 4 days a week as a minimum. For senior lawyers, the minimum requirement will be 3 days a week. We're seeing it. My junior colleagues, the trainees and the newly qualified just aren't getting the same training experience sitting at home. They're missing out on so much. And the minute they can, they're coming into the office. We are now getting here in the office, we're getting over 100 people a day coming in, and it's a different mix of people every day, but we're getting people coming back because they want to be amongst others doing what they're doing.
The challenge a bit with what Peter was saying, I think, about so much of any organisation's life is not what it thinks it is or says it is or explicitly expresses it is. It's part to do with a culture which you pick up in the corridor through osmosis, through associations, and indeed through livery companies, if you're talking about the City of London.
Yeah. I mean, one of the interesting things, one of the challenges we're facing is retaining staff as well. I mean, part of it, if you don't have that interaction with other people, the glue, the camaraderie disappears, and it becomes harder. Then it just becomes a question of how much you're paying somebody. And if somebody else comes along and they're paying you 5 or 10% more, that the ability to hang on to people in that is much reduced. You don't have that. You don't have that camaraderie that justify. So, and it's even worse at the moment in the virtual world. If somebody wanted to move from DLA Piper to Slaughter and May, effectively all they do today is change their laptop. Yeah. They'll hand in their DLA Piper laptop, and they'll be given a new laptop by Slaughter and May, and that's it. I mean, it's an extraordinary business that's all it takes to move jobs.
And a challenge, isn't it, also to create the corporate culture, which has become more and more important for talented people firms like yours want to hire. I mean, my experience is that more and more that employers feel that they're sort of being audited by potential employees who want to see what they're doing in terms of diversity, in terms of the environment, in terms of all sorts of issues that exercise bright young people.
Yeah, absolutely. I was a graduate recruitment partner for several years back in the late 2000s, just before. You could see it's happening then. I've absolutely no doubt it's so much more important now, and this speaks to one of the things I want to do as Lord Mayor, looking at my theme for the year, people and purpose, investing in a better future. Looking at that, the purpose, I think pretty much the top of the boardroom agenda today is this question of purpose in business. What are businesses? What is the purpose of a business? And a lot of that is, of course, driven by the employees, driven by the customers, by the consumers of products. They want to know they're working for a business that has values that they believe in and that they can espouse. And similarly, people want to buy products from companies which align with their values as well. So I think this is we're consumed at the moment. This year is all about environmental. By the end of the year, we will have heard as much as we'll all want to hear about the environmental agenda in many ways. Understandably, it's important. But I think there is a wider piece here. In the ESG agenda, the environmental, social, and governance agenda, the S piece, the social, is going to become more and more important.
Is there a square to circle in that? People look at the City of London and see it as a kind of behemoth that generates wealth and encourages investment and stands at the centre of enormous flows of wealth around the world. And perhaps people think that what you're talking about, while desirable, is not central, is not essential to that function, and the bottom line realities in the end will prevail. What's your response to that?
There is, I would admit, real tension there. It's very difficult to, there's challenges all the time, but I think there has been a shift, a real shift in mentality in the boardrooms, and it's been driven, as I said, it's driven by a change in generation in terms of business leaders, and a recognition that the next generation and the generation beyond that are looking at different values as well. And if you want to get good people to join your organization, you've got to respond to their values, and that means more diversity, for instance, which is good for business as well. The economic analysis shows very clearly that more diverse businesses make better decisions. So a lot of this makes good business sense too when people actually get a grip on it. So I think there is a real change. We don't just generate whatever it is, 75.6 billion in tax revenues for the country. It's more than just the economic return. People running businesses here in the city around me want to contribute in other ways too. They want to make their business impactful in a social sense as well.
You notice that I noticed an awful lot since my involvement in leather sellers is actually, you would have thought perhaps that a livery company would not be at the cutting edge of thinking about diversity, because they tend to be populated by people who are of a similar background, age, and obviously share interest in a particular sector. But they're much more diverse than I think they used to be, and they certainly seem to be getting more diverse. That conversation is much more widely held now.
Yeah, well, thankfully, I think that is. I mean, I think we finally breached the last barrier, the last bastion. The one remaining livery company until early last year was still operating on a men-only membership. So we now have, of the 100, I think all 110 livery companies now admit men and women. So it is pretty extraordinary, but. I think you're right, Richard. There is most companies are looking at and tackling the challenge of diversifying their membership, and it's complicated. It's not easy, but in many companies, certainly companies like the leather sellers, where patrimony, a lot of members join through their family connections. I've heard it from a number of masters, a number of court members in companies like that very often it's the daughter in the company that is more interested in getting involved than the son and in the family. And that's, so why should Jane not get her opportunity to join the company become master, in preference, when John traditionally would have been and very often John joined the company and didn't take any interest at all in it. I mean, even in companies where patrimony operates, I think there's a real push for change. And I would say as well that some of the delivery companies are doing fantastic things. I mean, they really are. I mean, a few of the companies like the information technologists, like the spectacle makers. That's one of the companies of which I'm a member, and Simon Bartley mentioned it earlier on. They're tremendously diverse membership, representing the optometrists and profession across the country. Very diverse, and it's great. It's great to see that, because it just means so much in the city to see that diversity at last coming through.
Do you think of yourself as partly perhaps an outsider, as an Irishman, as someone who came here from somewhere else and found his feet and his career working in, well, the legal system was not the one that you kind of grew up in? In a way, I think there is an element of that. I've never spent a lot of time thinking about it, but you're right in the sense and there was absolutely no way I would have imagined that I would end up Lord Mayor of London. That's just every step was just a step, and it's amazing if you keep saying yes to things where it leads you. But I at the time I just wanted to a couple of years, and then it became a question. Well, I requalified as a solicitor. I wanted to become a partner of the law firm. I got there, but it was just hard work and keeping going. And at that point, I was really focused on my career, and that provided a platform from which other things were able to happen. Peter Sutherland, the late Peter Sutherland, who was an Irish lawyer and went on to become he ran the predecessor of the WTO, the GATT, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, if people remember that, I'm sure. And and went on to become an EU commissioner and chaired BP and Goldman Sachs International. He had a tremendously successful career before he died, sadly, a little bit too young. He used to say that the one piece of advice his father gave him was that if he was on the playing field and he found the ball at his feet, kick it. And I think there's an element of that. I mean, you just got to keep kicking the ball and see where you go with it. Well, long may you kick. Thank you very much for being with us, Vincent. I know you're very busy. It's great to have you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. Good to see you.
Me too.